The story starts on a stormy day on top of a shadowed mansion where the silent assassin Akira faces off against another assassin racing for the same prey. Outmatched but defiant, the rival assassin refuses to yield and reaches inside his cloak for a hidden weapon. He darts forward, flinging blades toward Akira, but to his shock, they just slip through him. With no other choice, the man draws his sword and clashes with Akira in a flurry of sparks and steel. Their blades collide again and again until Akira knocks the man's weapon spinning into the air. The rival assassin quickly switches tactics, pulling out throwing knives and sending them flying. Akira dodges smoothly, but his opponent fires one last hidden projectile. To his horror, Akira vanishes right before his eyes, reappearing silently behind him. The man searches desperately for an opening, but Akira blocks every strike and forces his arms down. In a final attempt, the assassin swings with a kick from his bladed boot, but Akira anticipates the move, pierces his arm, then snaps his leg and sends him crashing to the ground. Though he has a few tricks left, the defeated assassin accepts his loss as his own blade, which is still midair, comes down and lands on him. With the threat gone, Akira slips into the mansion like a shadow, entering the dimly lit room where his target lies asleep. For a brief moment, he hesitates, but then he raises his blade to finish the job. Long before all this, Akira lived an ordinary life as a student in Japan. During one typical afternoon, a group of girls invited their friend Tsukasa to join them for lunch. He politely declined, saying he had duties to handle for the student council, which left them impressed by how seriously he took his role as president. Nearby, a girl named Shiori received thanks from classmates she'd had just helped. At the same time, Akira sat quietly, reading a novel on his phone. His friend Nanes walked up and asked if he enjoyed reading Isekai stories, but Akira simply replied that he read whatever was free. Laughing, Nanes told him to share any new recommendations before heading off. As Akira watched him go, a few girls whispered, wondering who Nanes had been talking to. As Akira eats alone, even he found it strange that someone actually talked to him, considering how invisible he is to everyone else at school. Without warning, Akira's phone begins to flicker and distort, and a strange, inky darkness spreads across the ceiling of the classroom. The shadows twist into the shape of a glowing circle, and luminous symbols gather beneath each student's feet. Everyone freezes in shock as a bright flash envelops the room. Then in the next instant, they find themselves standing inside an enormous hall. As confusion sets in, a peculiar man in priestly robes steps forward and informs them that the king will arrive shortly. When the priest moves aside, a regal-looking man and a young princess appear before them, prompting murmurs of curiosity among the group. The man introduces himself as the ruler of a distant world called Morrigan. He explains that they've been brought from another realm to aid the Retes Empire, located on the human side of the continent. The kingdom is currently under siege by demonic forces, and the king claims that warriors summoned from another world are the only ones capable of defeating the demon lord. The students, caught up in the excitement, begin to fantasize about their own grand adventure. But the priest cuts through the enthusiasm, stating that only one among them carries the mark of the true hero. To discover who it is, each student is asked to place a hand on a glowing orb that reveals their class. A boy named Waki steps up first and discovers he's been given a class of Beast Tamer. Though he's not the chosen one, the priest reassures him that his abilities still hold great value. Next, a girl named Yuki learns she's a disenchanter, while Tomoya receives the title of knight. And when Shiori discovers she's a healer, the priest announces that anyone can now check their class and stats on their own without the orb. The students eagerly open their status screens, and Nanes finds out he's a wind-type mage and turns to ask Akira what class he got. Akira responds quietly, revealing that he's been labeled an assassin, but he's baffled by how absurdly strong his numbers are. Then Tsukasa approaches the orb, and it glows brightly as it displays the hero class. The priest reacts with praise, stunned by the potential shown in his stats, and the rest of the students erupt into cheers for their charismatic class president. Akira, however, watches in silence because his instincts tell him something's off. If Tsukasa is the hero, why are his numbers so unimpressive when Akira's own stats are leagues beyond anything he's seen? As Nanes encourages him to show his class, Akira hesitates because he doesn't trust the king or his story about a demonic invasion. Choosing to stay hidden, Akira casts a concealment spell to suppress his presence. Seconds later, Nanes looks around in confusion, thinking Akira vanished, and walks away, while Isahina opens his status screen. Once everyone finishes checking their abilities, the priest announces that preparations for custom gear are underway and encourages the students to get some rest in their assigned quarters. Relieved that no one uncovered his secret, Akira quietly slips in with the rest of the group, keeping himself hidden under the concealment spell. While moving through the halls, he spots a surveillance device mounted on the ceiling and instantly realizes the king is observing their every move, so it confirms his suspicion that trusting the king would be a mistake. But what Akira doesn't realize, however, is that a knight has been trailing him from the shadows. At night, Akira locates an unused storage room and decides it's a good place to lie low. After settling in, he sneaks back out, determined to gather information. As he surveys the city's unfamiliar skyline, he's struck by how surreal it all feels. This really is another world. He bounds effortlessly between towers, stunned by how far his enhanced abilities have taken him. Midway through his scouting, he picks up the sound of voices nearby and quickly hides himself to listen in. Inside the chamber, the princess is speaking to the king, and she refers to the summoned students as naive kids with rare powers. The king, clearly confident, tells her to move forward with their plan, so she nods and exits the room. Hidden just a few feet away, Akira narrows his eyes, wondering what exactly the king has in mind. He briefly considers ending it right there. He could kill the man before anyone noticed. The king suddenly shivers, sensing something off, but when he turns around, the room appears empty, and he returns to his work. The following morning, Akira remains under concealment while grabbing some food. He debates whether to warn the others, but concludes they wouldn't take him seriously, not when they're so easily convinced by the king's lies. At a nearby table, Tsukasa rises and addresses the rest of the students. He praises the king for giving them powerful gifts and insists they owe it to him to help defeat the demon threat. The group, swept up by his speech, rallies behind him with full support. Watching from a distance, Akira can't help but sigh. They've already swallowed the king's fake narrative. Later in the afternoon, the Royal Knight Commander Saren gathers the new recruits outside for their first training session. He introduces himself with pride, boasting that he serves as the kingdom's final line of defense. His companion Jules steps in to gently remind him not to get too carried away. Saren then explains that all the summoned students will undergo a month-long training program before being sent into a labyrinth to face real monsters. Understanding they lack any real battle experience, he assures them that he'll help guide them through the basics. The students cheer, excited for what's to come, while Akira remains hidden nearby, carefully studying Saren and wondering what his true motives might be. As Akira steps away to search for more clues, Saren leaves the students under Jill's care and slips off the training grounds. Akira then makes his way toward a fountain, only to be startled when Saren suddenly calls out to him. Alarmed, Akira wonders if his conceal ability has a hidden time limit. But Saren assures him the magic is still active, it just doesn't work on him. The knight explains that he possesses mystic eyes, a rare trait that lets him perceive thermal energy, allowing him to detect living bodies even through invisibility. Akira instinctively reaches for his blade, uncertain whether Saren is friend or foe. But the commander quickly adds that he has no intention of revealing Akira's secret. Though Akira knows the knight serves the crown, he still isn't sure if he should place any faith in him. However, Saren insists that he's not working on the king's orders this time because he has his own reasons. Then he makes a request, keep this encounter between the two of them. After a moment of hesitation, Akira decided to give the man a chance. They take a seat nearby, and Akira tells him that he's interested in reading the king's archives to better understand this world. Saren asks what level Akira's concealment skill is, and Akira replies that it's already maxed. Everything else, however, is still at level 1, and he admits he doesn't know how to improve them. Saren raises an eyebrow, then chuckles, saying the library probably wouldn't help much anyway, so he offers to train Akira himself. The thought of growing stronger and uncovering the secrets of this world excites Akira, but even with that, he still longs to return to his home and see his family again. Saren agrees with that goal, but reminds him that until he finds a way back, he'll need strength to survive. Feeling guilty about receiving help without offering anything in return, Akira asks how he can repay the favor. Saren smiles and tells him to share stories from his homeland in exchange. Then as the knight extends his hand, Akira shakes it, smiling back and introducing himself properly, as a show of respect. From that day forward, they begin training together, and Akira learns that aside from humans and demons, this world is also home to elves and beast kin. He puts Akira through rigorous drills, explaining that job levels rise only by defeating monsters, but skills can be sharpened with regular practice. As they train day after day, Saren becomes more and more fascinated by Akira's tales of Earth. Listening to his own descriptions of smartphones, planes, and crowded cities, Akira realizes just how much he once took his old world for granted and how strange it feels to miss it now. Sometime later, Saren is sitting in a quiet room with Jules, who curiously asks why he's been spending so much time with Akira. Saren simply replies that Akira's stories about his home world were too entertaining to pass up, and Jules admits he finds them fascinating as well. But when Saren casually mentions that Akira possesses the true hero class and a max-level concealment ability, Jules freezes in shock because only the very first hero in their history had a maxed-out skill like that. Moments later, Akira approaches the room, and Jules politely excuses himself, leaving the two alone. Akira then hands Saren a book he took from the royal archive, noting that it contains some sensitive material. Saren confirms that the book outlines plans to overthrow the king, and explains that he wrote it himself and disguised it as a harmless cookbook, knowing Akira would eventually uncover it. Saren admits openly that the king is a corrupt man who's trying to reshape the world for his own twisted gain. Akira recalls the king's selection program and quietly reflects. Saren then adds that many within the royal knights have doubts about the king's rule. Akira then guesses that they intend to remove him with as little bloodshed as possible, and Saren confirms that. Akira mentions that with his current skill set, eliminating the king wouldn't be difficult, and he had slipped into the royal study on the first day without raising any alarms. But when the opportunity came, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Saren responds calmly, saying that having the assassin class doesn't mean he's obligated to take lives. So Akira quietly reflects that he wouldn't want his family to ever learn he'd become a killer. Saren agrees wholeheartedly, and Akira begins to question why someone like Saren would put so much faith in him. So Saren answers that it's because Akira has shown clarity and instinct, like when he refused to blindly trust the king's story from the start. That single decision in Saren's eyes proved that Akira thinks for himself, trusts his instincts, and doesn't get swayed easily. The room falls quiet for a moment, and Akira finally speaks up softly and says that he's not used to praise. That ever since he was young, people rarely noticed him at all. That catches Saren off guard, so Akira adds that he's the first person who's ever truly recognized him. With a warm smile, Saren lightly jokes, asking if Akira would be willing to help him pull off a peaceful coup as thanks for all the compliments. Akira gives a faint smirk and tells him he'll think about it, then quietly slips out of the room. After a full month of training sessions, Saren gathers the students and announces that they'll begin their expedition into the legendary Cantinan Labyrinth. Afterward, a crowd forms nearby to see the heroes off, and Akira is quietly surprised by how much attention they're getting. As his eyes scan the gathering, he notices a girl standing alone at a distance. In an instant, he appears behind her, startling her with a quiet question about what she's doing. Visibly annoyed, she responds bitterly, saying their people paid a heavy price to summon the heroes. Akira calmly says he has no idea what the hell she's talking about, but she simply says they'll speak again once he learns the truth, then walks away. Soon after, the heroes enter the dungeon and find themselves fighting waves of monsters. The group is caught off guard when one student accidentally activates a trap, causing a swarm of massive ogres to descend upon them. Akira takes down one of the beasts and quickly asks Saren if they should pull back. Saren agrees, and to buy them time, unleashes a powerful divine sword technique that wipes out the enemies blocking the route. However, as they pass through the dungeon gate expecting to escape danger, they're met with another horde of monsters waiting on the other side. In a moment of panic, Tsukasa remembers the emergency smoke bomb the princess gave him for emergencies and sets it off. The explosion clears the lesser beasts, but from within the haze, a freaking towering minotaur emerges. When Jules enters the chamber with the rest of the group, he's stunned to see such a powerful monster lurking on a low floor. Akira wastes no time and dashes forward, dodges a massive strike, and climbs onto the minotaur's back. He slashes, but his weapon snaps in half against the creature's dense hide. Alarmed, Akira leaps off to avoid a counterattack and rushes back towards Tsukasa, who's barely able to stand. Overwhelmed with guilt, Tsukasa mutters that he's useless, but Akira tells him that heroes aren't meant to carry the burden alone. He reminds him that every student here has been training too, and that it's time to let others fight alongside him. But Tsukasa's breathing quickens, and he begins to panic, consumed by fear and doubt. Noticing something off, Akira asks the party's disenchanter to step in. She steps forward, activates her spell, removing the dark curse that had been feeding Tsukasa's fear. And as soon as it's lifted, Tsukasa regains clarity. With Tsukasa stabilized, Akira turns to Saren and asks if it's time to use the technique they discussed. Saren gives a firm nod and launches a flash of lightning that crashes into the Minotaur, stunning the beast in front of the awestruck students. Seizing the moment, Akira disappears into the shadows and reappears silently behind the monster, ready to unleash his ultimate shadow-based spell. From the shadows, pitch-black tendrils suddenly erupt, latching onto the Minotaur and driving straight through its body. With the beast completely immobilized, Akira begins pulling it into the darkness, its massive frame slowly vanishing until only its severed head remains. Though he managed to eliminate the creature, Akira still doesn't have full mastery over his shadow powers, and the energy begins surging out of control. Luckily, Saren rushes in and helps stabilize him, coaching Akira through the process until he's able to calm his mind and retract the tendrils. Once the danger has passed, the group returns to the castle. There, Saren commends Akira for completing the mission. It was because of him that everyone returned safely. But while the shadow technique is undeniably powerful, it puts a heavy strain on the body, so Saren warns him not to use it unless truly vital. To acknowledge his efforts, Saren hands Akira a gift, a katana. He explains that the blade was originally forged by the very first summoned hero centuries ago. Akira thanks him for the weapon, but he's curious why give such a legendary blade to him instead of the kingdom's current hero Tsukasa. So Saren replies that Tsukasa already possesses the holy sword meant for battle, Besides, the king would definitely become suspicious if he saw Tsukasa carrying this one, especially since Saren technically stole it from the royal vault. Akira gets the picture and accepts the weapon, quietly thinking it's amazing that he now wields the same sword used by the original hero. But that thought leads him back to the unresolved issue with Tsukasa. Though they had managed to confirm that he was under a curse and had partially alleviated it with a disenchantment spell, the root of the affliction still remained, so Akira intends to get to the bottom of it. At night, he sneaks into the princess's chambers and finds her mid-ritual, enhancing the curse on Tsukasa with a glowing crystal, her magic steadily transforming him into a mindless puppet. Without hesitation, Akira slices the crystal clean in half, disrupting the spell. That should neutralize the curse at least for now, but Akira isn't finished. With his blade drawn, he places it at the princess's throat and demands to know why she's doing this shit. Her response is cold and mechanical. She claims she's acting for the king's sake. But as Akira looks closer, he realizes something chilling. There's no emotion in her eyes, no will, no intent. She isn't choosing this path, and she's just another victim under someone else's control. Killing her wouldn't make sense, not like this, so without another word, Akira lowers his sword and silently walks away. Still, Akira probably should have finished her off because the moment he leaves, the princess walks over to her closet, revealing a hidden stash of cursed crystals, one for each of his classmates. And without hesitation, she begins activating them. Not long after, Akira brings a few of the shards to Saren, hoping he might know something. The moment Saren lays eyes on them, his expression darkens. He mutters under his breath, frustrated that the king is still pursuing this madness. He tells Akira he's seen these kinds of crystals before. Then he asks if Akira made direct contact with the princess while destroying the one on Tsukasa. Akira admits he did, and he confronted her on purpose, hoping to understand her motivations. Saren shakes his head and explains that there's no real point in trying to reason with her. At this stage, she's nothing more than a tool being manipulated by the king. Still, Saren says Akira has done enough for one night and advises him to get some rest, but not at the castle because things have changed now. With Tsukasa's crystal destroyed, the princess will likely move on to targeting the rest of their classmates. The only reason Akira is safer now is because she doesn't know who he really is. But now that she knows someone is working from the shadows, Saren's certain the castle guard will be conducting a full sweep tonight. So hiding in storerooms won't work anymore. Akira apologizes for blowing his cover without thinking through the consequences, but Saren simply smiles and tells him there's no need to be sorry. Making mistakes is just part of growing up, and it's his job as the adult in the room to help pick up the pieces. Akira nods, thankful to have someone like Saren in his corner. Saren chuckles and says that if Akira truly wants to repay him, then he better bring him along when he figures out how to get back to Japan. That night, Akira sleeps up in one of the trees outside the castle, but his rest is cut short by the sound of chaos echoing through the courtyard at dawn. Curious, he sneaks back to see what's going on. He spots a group of guards gathered around with a few of his classmates. Among them is Tsukasa, who lights up the second he sees Akira approaching. He looks relieved, but also deeply shaken. Akira's heart lifts for a second, happy to see that Tsukasa appears to be free from the curse, but the look on his friend's face immediately tells him something is wrong. Tsukasa runs up to him in a panic and asks where he's been. Akira casually replies that he was just resting, but asks what happened here. He was expecting something minor. Instead, his eyes fall on the scene behind the crowd, and he freezes. Commander Saren is lying motionless on the ground with a dagger buried in his heart. Akira collapses to his knees, overwhelmed by the sight of Saren's body. His voice cracks as he demands to know who could have done something like this. But before anyone can answer, his classmates suddenly turn against him. One after another, they start accusing him of being the killer. The dagger lodged in Saren's chest looks just like the one Akira had been using the day before. It would be strong evidence, except all of them saw that same dagger shatter during the Minotaur battle, so there's no way this one could be his. Still, that doesn't stop them, and they insist Akira's behavior has always been suspicious, constantly vanishing and reappearing whenever he wants, so that's reason enough for them. Akira quickly realizes what's happening. The princess must have cursed the entire class, and the only one still acting normal is Tsukasa. He tries to speak up for Akira, saying there's no proof to accuse him of something this serious, but before he can say much more, the king arrives. With a cold, commanding tone, the king announces that Akira is guilty of high treason for assassinating Commander Saren. He gives a direct order. Akira is to be executed on the spot. Akira glances at the princess, and in that split second, he catches the faintest smirk curling at the edge of her lips, and right away, he realizes the whole thing is a setup. There's no point trying to explain anything because no one will believe him. As the guards move in with their weapons drawn, Akira activates his concealment skill, vanishing before their eyes. Furious, the king orders his men to sweep the entire castle, and he wants Akira found now. Meanwhile, Akira silently moves through the shadows and approaches Jules, one of the few people he knows he can trust. Once Jules notices him, he quietly tells Akira that the ones who really killed Saren were the king's own assassins. And now that Akira is a target, he needs to escape fast. Jules then adds that Saren had a feeling something like this might happen, so he left behind a bag of supplies just in case. Akira thanks him, grabs the supplies, and escapes the kingdom. Later that evening, the king and princess meet in secret to discuss how smoothly their plan has gone. The king admits he didn't expect it to be this easy to get rid of Saren. But thankfully, the assassins did their job cleanly. The princess informs him that the rest of the class, except Tsukasa, is now fully under her curse. The next step is to find a reason to launch a war with the Eastern nation. The king says the students will be perfect tools for that war, and as for the one who slipped away, he doubts some kid could survive alone out there. But just to be sure, he tells the princess to send the Meg Ravens, his deadliest assassins, to track him down. At the same time, Akira had just reached the dungeon. Just like Saren once said, it's the best place to stay hidden when you're being hunted. No one in their right mind would think to check a dungeon just to chase after someone, so it should serve as a decent hideout. But food and water are scarce down here, so he'll have to be cautious. Even though Akira can cloak himself with his concealment skill, plenty of monsters still exist that rely on enhanced senses like smell and hearing. But as he continues to grow stronger and his assassin class ranks up, he'll eventually be able to erase all traces of scent, silence his steps, and even suppress body heat, making himself nearly invisible. Boss rooms appear every 10 floors, and once you're inside, the only way out is to kill the boss. It's a major gamble to enter one alone, but Akira doesn't exactly have the luxury of waiting things out. As he walks deeper into the dungeon, he's immediately attacked by a chimera. At first, he manages to dodge its claws and fangs, but then its snake tail spits a jet of venom, catching him off guard and striking his leg. The poison slows him down and he can't maneuver like before. That gives the beast an opening, and it slashes his back, drawing blood. Just as it prepares to go in for the kill, Akira unleashes his trump card and shadow magic erupts and completely consumes the chimera in a single blow. With that, he defeats the dungeon's first boss, but the combination of his injuries and the toll of using the shadow spell leaves him barely clinging to life. Recognizing that its master is in danger, the shadow energy automatically shifts into regeneration mode, patching his wounds while he's unconscious. At the same time, in the royal castle, Tsukasa asks everyone to follow him out of the capital. His classmates blink at him, asking if he's seriously saying they should go take down the Demon King right now. It sounds like a decent excuse, so Tsukasa just rolls with it. But his classmates immediately shut him down, telling him to sit back down and stop dreaming because they're not going anywhere. That reaction confirms what Saren warned him about before his death. The curse is real, and it's controlling their minds. If that's true, then Tsukasa realizes he'll have no choice but to leave on his own. But unexpectedly, a few of his classmates step forward and say they'll come with him. And a few hours later, that small group is standing with Tsukasa just outside the city border. They're a bit stunned that leaving the city was so easy, but when they think about it, it makes sense. Their excuse was that they were heading off to fight the Demon Lord, and it wouldn't look good for the king to stop his own heroes from completing their assigned duty. With that settled, Tsukasa turns to the others and asks why they chose to come along, especially when everyone else refused to even consider it. Yuki replies that she doesn't believe anyone in their group is under the princess's influence anymore. Asahina then speaks up, saying that he thinks he might help break the curse somehow. He's not entirely sure why, but he has a blurry memory of sneaking into the princess's chamber and smashing several crystals. We later learn that the one behind that action was actually Jill's. He had used his manipulation ability to temporarily take control of Asahina's body in order to dismantle the curse. And while he wasn't able to free everyone, he's at least relieved that he could carry out Saren's final wish. As the group finally steps beyond the kingdom's borders, Asahina finds himself thinking about Akira. He deeply regrets not trying to find him sooner while he was still hiding within the castle. Even if he had been under a curse, he still feels horrible for not defending Akira when he needed it most. Back in their original world, most of the class hadn't spoken to Akira much at school, but one day while walking home, Asahina happened to run into him on a construction site. It was their first time meeting outside the classroom. Akira had asked him to keep the job a secret because he didn't want his younger sister to find out. Asahina agreed without hesitation since he also had a little sister to look after. Coincidentally, both of their sisters happened to be close friends and the two boys had laughed about it at the time. Back in the dungeon, Akira finally regains consciousness. For some reason, the first thing that comes to mind is a dream, one that reminded him of the day he met Asahina, so he sincerely hopes Asahina is okay. He also finds himself thinking about his mother and sister back in Japan. But once that moment passes, something odd dawns on him. He's not in unbearable pain. Even though he clearly remembers getting slashed across the back by the chimera, he doesn't feel nearly as bad as he should. Calling up his status screen, Akira notices something surprising. His stats have improved significantly after the fight with the Chimera, but what really shocks him is his HP since it's nearly full, even after the serious injuries he took. He also spots that his shadow magic has jumped to level 3, and he can't figure out how it rose so much after a single use. Still, there's no time to dwell on it right now, so he gets back on his feet and prepares to move forward. Deeper into the dungeon, Akira encounters a massive slime blocking the passage. After slicing it open, he's stunned to find a beautiful elf girl trapped inside. Thinking this is a good chance to test out one of his newly unlocked abilities, he activates World's Eye, a skill that instantly floods his mind with everything about the target's life. But there's way too much information pouring in at once, and the overload becomes unbearable. He's forced to cancel the skill partway through before his brain fries from the sheer volume of knowledge. Looking at her status, he notices her HP is dangerously low, barely at 2%. Akira gently lifts her and carries her up to the 69th floor, where there's a calm water pool. He sets her down to rest and recuperate. Sometime later, she stirs awake, and Akira offers her water to help her recover. He tells her to try and get more rest, but she admits that she's too hungry to sleep. So he whips up a bowl of warm porridge and hands it to her. Grateful, the elf girl, who introduces herself as Amelia, digs in without hesitation. Once she finishes, she looks around and asks how she ended up here, since her last memory was being much deeper in the dungeon. Akira tells her he carried her up to the nearest water source so she could recover safely. She's surprised by his kindness, admitting that no one has ever gone out of their way to help her like that, not even once. A few hours pass and Amelia is back in top form. Together, they descend all the way to the 80th floor. Akira starts to wonder why she's still tagging along, and he figures she'd want to return to the surface after everything. But Amelia tells him she has no intention of leaving. She came down here to conquer the dungeon herself, and she's not leaving until that goal is met. Eventually, they enter the boss chamber, and the moment they step inside, a massive dragon lunges at them. They leap in opposite directions to avoid being flattened. Amelia reacts first, using gravity magic to pin the creature down, giving Akira a chance to strike. But just as he gets close, the dragon locks onto him and swats him out of the air. From the ground, Akira hears Amelia shout, telling him the dragon is tracking his mana signature, so he needs to disperse it throughout the environment. Problem is, Akira doesn't know how to do that. So instead, he improvises, pulling in surrounding mana and unleashing it as a raw blast of energy before rushing in and driving his blade straight through the dragon's eye, ending the battle. The dragon collapses, lifeless, but Amelia looks at Akira, baffled by what he just did. He explains that since he didn't know how to hide his own mana, he just used the ambient mana around them as a weapon instead. She stares at him in disbelief because normal people can't do that. But before she can ask how he pulled it off, the dragon's body suddenly starts to glow brightly. The dragon then suddenly shifts form, transforming into an enormous blue cat, leaving both Akira and Amelia completely baffled by what they've just seen. Amelia activates her World Eye ability and quickly discovers that the creature is a shapeshifter, which explains how it had taken the form of a dragon. With that information, everything begins to make sense to her. After all, a genuine dragon would have been far more resilient than this feline imposter. Akira is amazed at how effortlessly Amelia is able to use her World Eye, and she turns to ask why he hasn't activated his own. He recalls the last time he tried when it felt like his brain was about to split in half, and assumes it must be because his level isn't yet high enough to handle it safely. But Amelia disagrees and believes that the real issue is that Akira is subconsciously rejecting the skill, which is what's actually preventing him from using it properly. Right then, the black cat awakens and starts to speak. He seems annoyed that he was defeated by a mere human and an elf, especially since he had transformed into a dragon just for entertainment. Akira is stunned to hear the feline talk, but his shock seems to offend the creature. The cat sternly tells him not to lump him in with the mindless, low-level beasts driven solely by instinct because he is a higher being, created directly by the demon lord himself. Akira, however, remains unfazed and responds that it doesn't matter either way because after that last blow, the cat is in no shape to continue fighting. The black cat shows no concern about dying, but before he goes, he has a message for Akira. He slowly rises to his feet, his body now radiating a dark, threatening aura, and announces that the demon lord is waiting for him in his castle deep within the volcano region of the demon continent. That declaration instantly raises Akira's suspicions, and he demands to know how the demon lord even knows about him, and why he would want him to visit his domain. The cat answers that the demon lord is a being beyond mortal comprehension, and thus he cannot explain anything further. Exhausted, the cat lies back on the ground and tells Akira to finish him off, but Akira refuses. The cat scoffs and tells him to stop acting noble, insisting that humans see all demons and monsters as enemies anyway, so killing him should be expected. But Akira doesn't share that belief because to him the true enemy is the king, not demons, and he's not willing to accept that they're automatically the enemy just because they're different. However, Emilia steps in and reminds him that the door to the boss's room won't open unless the boss kills them or they kill the boss. The cat agrees with Emilia's logic and sarcastically asks Akira if he's planning to starve to death in this room. Curious, he questions why Akira refuses to kill him, and the response is both unexpected and strangely simple. Akira explains that he's a cat person, and unlike other monsters, this one can actually speak. So he's convinced there must be a workaround that allows them to leave the boss room without resorting to killing the creature. That's when Emilia recalls an alternative method. If Akira forms a contract with the black cat and accepts him as his familiar, the creature will no longer be recognized as a boss, which will cause the room's door to unlock. The black cat scoffs at the suggestion, mocking the idea by stating that only a seasoned magic user with precise mana control could ever perform such a ritual, and he doubts Akira has the capability. Emilia disagrees and reveals that Akira has already surpassed the minimum requirement for the ritual, and she reminds the cat of how Akira previously separated his mana from his body in order to disorient him, an advanced maneuver only the first hero has ever pulled off. She believes Akira is more than capable of completing the ritual, although she admits she can't guarantee his success. Akira then asks what happens if he fails, and the black cat warns that either one of them will die, or in the worst case, both of their lives may be lost. Despite the risk, Akira is ready to go through with it, though the cat remains confused as to why he would even take such a gamble. With a resigned tone, the cat tells him to go ahead, claiming he no longer cares whether he lives or dies. That cavalier attitude irritates Akira, who snaps back at the cat's indifference toward life. But the feline calmly replies that continuing to live holds no meaning for him anymore. Akira decides to address that mindset later, but for now he turns to Emilia and asks how to begin the ritual. She explains that the first step is to give the cat a new name. After a moment of thought, Akira names him Night, inspired by the cat's dark fur that reminds him of the night sky. The cat remains silent, showing no reaction to the name, so Akira proceeds to the next step, infusing mana directly into Night's paw. Emilia warns that once the mana transfer begins, there's no turning back. If Akira loses control during the process, it could very well cost him his life. But Akira doesn't hesitate, and he's confident in his ability to succeed. The moment he begins pouring mana into the cat's paw, he's hit by a sudden and overwhelming wave of energy. He quickly realizes that this surge is the power housed within the cat. But before he can steady himself, his vision shifts violently, and he finds himself plummeting toward a city engulfed in flames. Horrified, Akira watches the terrifying scene unfold, and amidst the chaos, he sees Night mercilessly tearing through the city, slaughtering anyone who tries to flee. Akira attempts to stop him, but Night launches an attack with a torrent of dark mana that strikes Akira with devastating force. As Akira pulls himself back up, Night urges him to stop hesitating and just end it, saying it's the only way he'll be able to leave this place alive. But even then, Akira still can't bring himself to strike the cat. Seeing this, Night launches another assault, slashing him hard with his powerful claws. The pain Akira suffers inside the dream world begins to affect his real body too, and at last he makes the decision to fight back. He hurls his dagger at Night, but the cat bats it aside with ease and starts channeling his dark energy to end the battle swiftly. Akira charges forward, but instead of landing a blow, he deliberately takes the hit, allowing Night's claws to pierce straight through him. The black cat stares at him stunned and asks in disbelief what the hell he is trying to do. Akira responds calmly, saying he still refuses to kill him, and that deep down he knows Night doesn't want to hurt anyone either. Night scoffs, reminding him that he's still a monster. Even if he has intelligence, his instincts constantly scream at him to destroy anything that stands in his way. But Akira sees through that facade, and he knows that Meg is exhausted from the endless cycle of killing, and he tells him that he no longer has to fight those urges alone. Gripping his claws tightly, Akira makes a quiet vow to watch over him, to be by his side, and ensure he never has to go through something like this again. Slowly, the oppressive dream world starts to fade away, and as Night begins to place his trust in Akira, his monstrous form diminishes into that of a small, ordinary black cat resting peacefully in Akira's arms. The sun rises within the dream, casting its golden light as a symbol of the inner peace Night is beginning to feel. With that, Akira emerges from the dream world, and realizing that the pact ritual succeeded, he reaches out to touch Night and confirm it. A radiant golden mark appears on the back of his hand, and at the same time, the red sigil on Meg's forehead shifts into gold as well. Emilia explains that this is the seal of a successful pact, and their souls have now been spiritually connected. Night awakens too, gazing up at Akira and expressing his curiosity to see just how far his new master will go. With quiet resolve, he accepts Akira as his master and solemnly pledges his loyalty and life to his service. Amelia steps forward and introduces herself, and Knight, recognizing her as his master's companion, offers her his respect as well. At that moment, a magic circle begins to glow on the ground, signaling that the boss has officially been defeated. Yet Akira appears lost in thought. He says he'd prefer to move on to the next floor, but Knight is still badly wounded. Knight reassures him, explaining that the door will remain open until they decide to use it, so there's no need to rush. He opts to take some time to heal, and Amelia suggests that this might be the perfect opportunity for all of them to get to know each other better. Knight immediately agrees, and Akira can't help but be a little surprised by just how fast his new companion's personality flipped. Meanwhile, Tsukasa and his group arrive in a nation established by a hero who, like them, was summoned from Earth. They're stunned to find that the entire country mirrors the appearance of historical Japan. The surroundings feel oddly nostalgic, and for the first time in a while, they start to relax before sitting down to discuss their next steps. Tsukasa brings up the most immediate concern, their finances, pointing out that they're only a month away from running out of money and being left without a place to stay. One of the guys suggests they become adventurers, saying it's the most suitable occupation for people like them. Tsukasa agrees and then shifts the conversation to their next priority, gathering information. He proposes they seek out someone well-versed in the ways of this world and also dig through books that might contain useful knowledge. Another member of the group sighs, hoping there's a book somewhere that explains how to return to Earth. But Tsukasa believes their best chance lies in defeating the Demon Lord. He explains that only the king and the princess might know how to send them back, and despite their cruel and manipulative nature, the only way to earn their cooperation is by taking down the Demon Lord. He firmly states that once they've secured enough money and intel, their next destination will be the Demon Continent, but Asahina doesn't agree with that plan. He argues that they should first reunite with Akira before heading off, because his instincts tell him that Akira's power is advancing at a pace far beyond anyone else's, and they'll need him if they hope to succeed. Some members side with Asahina, while others remain suspicious, still thinking he may have been responsible for Commander Saren's death. The disagreement quickly escalates into a small argument, but the girls step in and try to calm everyone down. They turn to Tsukasa, asking for his judgment on the matter, since as the leader he gets the final say. Tsukasa sides with Asahina, admitting that he too believes Akira is already stronger than all of them, but he also doubts whether they'll actually be able to work with him. He explains that Akira has always kept his distance from others, and even now he doesn't remember Tsukasa despite the fact that they've been classmates since kindergarten. The group is stunned by that revelation, and even Asahina agrees that Akira isn't exactly the type to play well with the team. Tsukasa explains that according to the old legend, only the holy sword wielded by the chosen hero has the power to defeat the Demon Lord, meaning he must grow strong enough to fulfill that role. He believes that even if they do find Akira, he likely won't agree to join forces with them if they're still too weak. That's why Tsukasa decides it's best to stay in this country for now, giving everyone time to train and grow stronger before attempting to reunite with him. Meanwhile, Amelia opens up to Akira and Knight, sharing the story of her past. She reveals that her own sister forced her out of their homeland, and the soldiers who once served under her became relentless in their pursuit to kill her. Eventually, they cornered her near a cliff, and in a desperate move, she used her gravity magic to plunge into the river below, which carried her far away to safety. But she was badly injured and utterly exhausted, and that's when a black slime appeared and swallowed her whole. The next thing she remembered was waking up inside the dungeon moments after Akira had rescued her. Akira feels sympathy after hearing her story, but Knight picks up on a few strange details. He points out that slimes typically don't devour people, and even if one had swallowed Amelia, she would have been digested long before Akira found her. Amelia admits that she doesn't fully understand it either, but she's thankful to that slime regardless, because it somehow brought her to Akira. Akira gently tells her that she should consider returning to her homeland and trying to reconcile with her sister, but Amelia has already given up on that idea. She says she doesn't have the strength to face her sister again. Akira reassures her, saying things tend to work out between siblings because no matter what happens, they're still family. He adds that he has a sister too, and even though she's constantly giving him a hard time, he still cares about her deeply. Amelia and Knight then ask if Akira wants to return to his own world and see his family again. Akira says yes, but not yet because there's something he needs to take care of first. He begins to talk about Saren, the man who taught him how to survive in this world, and as he recalls the betrayal that took Saren's life, his emotions boil over. His voice sharpens with rage as he swears to kill both the king and the princess for orchestrating Saren's assassination. The fury behind his words sends a chill down Amelia and Knight's spines, and Amelia shouts his name, jolting him back to his senses. As the storm inside him subsides, both Amelia and Knight reveal that they know the name because Saren was once a renowned knight commander known across the land. Sensing the heavy mood, Akira decides to break the tension. He pulls on a glove and waves it in front of Knight, and true to his feline instincts, the black cat immediately pounces after it. Akira chuckles, surprised that the same trick he used on all the strays back home works on a monster cat too. Amelia, intrigued, asks to give it a try herself. And before long, both she and Akira are playfully cuddling with Knight, enjoying the soft, warm comfort of his fluffy fur as the air around them lightens once again. Knight turns to Akira and tells him to take things more seriously, reminding him that their souls are now linked, and if one of them dies, the other will perish as well. Akira says he's well aware of that, but he's still just happy to have a cat familiar, especially since he's always loved cats. Amelia chimes in with a sigh, admitting that she's jealous because she loves cats too. Once they finish fooling around, the group prepares to exit the dungeon. Akira asks Knight where the teleportation magic circle will take them, but the feline admits he doesn't know. He explains that only a select few demons still remember the ancient craft of creating such circles, and Akira instantly decides that once he reaches the demon continent, he'll track those demons down and make them work for him. Just then, a memory clicks in Amelia's mind. She recalls an old tale about pale blue teleportation circles that respond to a person's desire, taking them wherever their heart truly wants to go. However, if more than one person enters, the circle only reacts to the wishes of one individual. Akira notes that this could become a problem, but Amelia assures him with a gentle smile that she's fine going anywhere as long as she's with him. Akira doesn't dwell on her words, but as he steps into the magic circle, his thoughts briefly drift to his family. He wonders if the circle could possibly take him back home, but quickly shakes the idea away because his priority right now is revenge. With that, the magic circle lights up, and the group is instantly teleported to a dense forest where a massive, awe-inspiring tree towers in the distance. Amelia freezes in shock at the sight, while Knight calmly identifies the tree as the World Tree. He tells them that they've arrived in the Forest of Elves. Amelia is stunned they ended up here, but Akira finds it to be a welcome turn of events. Suddenly, an arrow flies through the air, aimed directly at Amelia. Fortunately, Akira spots it just in time and swiftly pulls her out of harm's way. He immediately charges toward the source of the attack, batting aside his second arrow with his dagger and closing the distance in a flash. In one fluid move, he brings the hidden archer down to the forest floor, and Amelia quickly identifies him. It's Liam. Liam scowls and says he never imagined he'd run into the traitor while investigating the strange light in this area. He warns Amelia to flee if she wants to survive, but Akira is in no mood for empty threats. He knocks Liam out cold, uninterested in his dramatic declarations. However, his moment of action was just a bit too late, and he looks up and sees that they've already been surrounded. Leading the Elven forces is none other than Amelia's sister Kilika. With cold determination in her eyes, she tells Amelia that since she dared return to the country on her own, her death is now inevitable. But then we see that before everything changed, Amelia's life had been going remarkably well. She was next in line to inherit the throne of the Elf Kingdom, and she believed her relationship with her sister was strong. At least that's what she thought. But over time, her trusted advisors and royal guards began to turn against her, and eventually, Kilika leveled a shocking accusation, claiming Amelia had committed a terrible crime. Without any investigation, the guards hastily concluded that Amelia was guilty, simply because she was born a child of blight. As a result, she was forced to escape the kingdom before Kilika and her forces could kill her. And now that they're face to face once more, Amelia is completely at a loss. She tries reasoning with Kilika, insisting she'll leave voluntarily, so there's no need for conflict. But Kilika is determined to capture her at any cost. Before Kilika can make a move, however, Akira steps forward and positions himself protectively in front of Amelia. Kilika sharply questions Akira, demanding to know who he thinks he is to meddle in elven affairs. He replies calmly that he only met Amelia yesterday, but he genuinely likes her, and he won't stand by while Kilika speaks to her in such a way. He also points out that Kilika keeps calling Amelia a criminal and asks her directly what crime Amelia supposedly committed. In response, Kilika rolls up her sleeve to reveal a deep, discolored bruise stretching across her arm. She claims that Amelia once gave her a potion that was secretly laced with poison, an act that even within royal bloodlines is absolutely unforgivable. Amelia immediately defends herself, insisting that the mixture she gave Kilika truly was just a potion, but Kilika brushes it off and says no one would ever believe that story. She then steps closer to Akira and stares directly into his eyes. Sensing Kilika's intention, Amelia quickly warns Akira to back away, but it's already too late. Kilika lets out a smug laugh and announces that her mesmerize ability is already in effect, meaning Akira is now under her spell, and as far as she's concerned, Amelia has officially lost her only ally. Kilika fully expects to see Amelia crumble with despair, but instead, what she sees in her sister's eyes is pure fury. Amelia shouts at Kilika to break the spell and apologize to Akira because he deserves the freedom to choose who he wants to love. This sudden outburst catches Kilika completely off guard because she had always viewed Amelia as weak and timid, but right now, she looks like she's ready to tear someone apart. Right then, Akira steps forward and calmly tells Amelia to relax, assuring her that he's not under the influence of any spell. That's because mental type abilities like Mesmerize only work on individuals who are significantly weaker than the caster. Kilika scoffs, refusing to believe that someone she considers a lowborn like Akira could possibly be stronger than her, but he couldn't care less about her opinion of him. What does matter to him, however, is how people view Amelia, so he firmly tells Kilika that she needs to retract the false accusations she made against her. Kilika demands to know what makes him so sure the accusations are false, and Akira responds by saying he's confident that Amelia would never resort to something as disgraceful as poisoning her own sister. Realizing there's no persuading Akira to hand Amelia over, Kilika abruptly commands her guards to execute him on the spot. But before any of them can make a move, the king of the Elf Nation appears unexpectedly and orders everyone to lower their weapons immediately. Kilika is stunned to see him, since he was supposed to be away on an extended inspection for several more months, but the king explains that something urgent came up, prompting his early return. He then demands an explanation for what Kilika is doing out here, but before she can respond, all the guards quickly speak up in her defense, claiming she's done nothing wrong. The king immediately suspects that she must have used her Mesmerize ability to manipulate the guards, so he commands her to release them from her control at once. Then, without hesitation, he walks over to Amelia and offers her a heartfelt apology. He doesn't know exactly what her sister has put her through, but he assures her that Kilika will be held accountable for her actions. After that, he turns to Akira and sternly instructs him to leave immediately, stating that there's no valid reason for a human to be trespassing on elven territory. Amelia steps in to defend Akira, explaining to her father that he's the one who saved her and brought her home safely. And while the king acknowledges that he is thankful for Akira's role in returning Amelia, his disdain for humans remains unchanged, so he insists that Akira leave regardless. In that case, Amelia declares that she'll leave too, but the king becomes furious and refuses to allow it since Amelia is the only one he fully trusts to succeed him as ruler of the kingdom, and he won't stand by and let her walk away. Still, Akira steps in and reminds him that it's not his decision to make, it's Amelia's. The king firmly tells Akira to stay out of the matter, insisting it doesn't concern him, but Akira isn't one of the king's subjects, so he sees no reason to follow that command. In fact, he states plainly that he's more than ready to make the king listen by force if necessary, and judging by what Akira just did to Liam, who's still lying on the ground, the king can already tell he isn't bluffing. That said, the king has never been one to shy away from a challenge, so he formally proposes a duel to Akira, under the condition that the loser must obey the victor's commands. Akira agrees without hesitation, and with the challenge set, the king declares that the fight will take place at the base of the holy tree, in keeping with elven custom. And as they head toward it, Amelia quietly apologizes to Akira for dragging him into this mess, but he tells her there's no need because he willingly chose to get involved. Shifting the conversation, he brings up how Kilika called her a child of blight and asks what that's all about. Amelia explains that, according to an ancient elven legend, when twins are born, one may be different from their parents. This child is believed to bring disaster upon the land and is thus labeled a child of blight. In the past, it was common for the odd twin to be killed at birth because of this belief, and Knight is taken aback to hear that elves still hold onto that superstition, even though it was debunked long ago. Amelia explains that it usually isn't an issue anymore, but recently Kilika has been using it against her more frequently, mainly because Amelia's eye and hair color differ from all of their family. It's painfully clear that Kilika is just using the legend as a convenient excuse to cast Amelia out, but personally, Akira remarks that he finds Amelia's hair and eyes to be absolutely gorgeous. Eventually, they arrive at the base of the holy tree, and since Kilika was the one who instigated the conflict, she will be the one to face Akira in the duel. But before it begins, Akira makes the decision not to use his concealment skill, because there's no point in winning unless everyone can see it happen with their own eyes. Amelia warns him that Kilika is the strongest swordsman among all the elves, so the battle won't be easy and he should stay on his guard. Akira picks up on the fact that Amelia still seems to speak of her sister with admiration, even after everything that's happened. She explains that they were once incredibly close as children, and no matter what Kilika does, Amelia will always see her as her beloved sister. As the duel begins, Kilika pulls her sword while Akira opts to keep his own blade sheathed. Kilika demands to know if he's trying to insult her by not taking the duel seriously, but Akira calmly replies that he simply doesn't want to risk accidentally killing her in combat. Once the duel starts, Kilika rushes forward and unleashes a flurry of precise strikes aimed at his vital points, yet Akira effortlessly evades each one. He admits that Kilika truly lives up to her reputation as the strongest swordsman, but his speed is simply beyond hers, allowing him to slip through her attacks and push her back with ease. He then advises Kilika to surrender before she hurts herself, but she refuses to be underestimated and activates her trump card. A fierce current of wind envelops her blade, and she releases a violent gust toward Akira. The technique takes him by surprise, catching him off guard for a moment, though he quickly regains composure and sidesteps the blast. Knight identifies Kilika's skill as buff magic, and Emilia explains that it's the only form of magic Kilika can wield, one she's honed nearly to perfection through relentless training. With this ability, Kilika launches devastating wind attacks at will, forcing Akira to stay on the move to avoid them. Amid the clash, she notices a deep sadness on her face. When he asks about it, she denies it, claiming she's happier than ever, but Akira insists she looks anything but. Unwilling to entertain his probing any longer, Kilika hurls another attack, but he smoothly ducks under it and sweeps her legs, sending her crashing to the dirt. Before she can recover, Akira appears behind her, resting his sword gently against her neck, a silent sign that he could have ended the fight at any moment. Once again, he urges her to surrender and reconcile with Emilia, but Kilika refuses with fierce defiance. She snaps that she could never make peace with someone who took everything away from her, then bursts into a furious rage, unleashing uncontrollable waves of wind in every direction. She cries out that she's been left with nothing, that Emilia and her divine blessing took it all away. In the past, Kilika and Emilia had been close friends, but everything changed when Emilia was revealed to possess the spirit medium class. Once mastered, it promised unmatched power across the continent, and from that day onward, nothing Kilika achieved was ever considered enough. Emilia tries to assure her that none of it is true, but Kilika is far too consumed by anger to listen. Right then, Liam walks up to Emilia and quietly asks for her help to save Kilika, handing her something that immediately makes her understand his plan. She climbs onto Knight's back and uses the holy tree branch Liam gave her to channel purification magic, breaking the spell that had everyone under Kilika's control. The moment the enchantment lifts, Kilika descends into a wild frenzy, summoning her strongest wind blast yet, so Akira is forced to counter using his shadow magic, and after a fierce struggle, he manages to overpower the raging winds, sending Kilika crashing to the ground and stripping away her will to continue fighting. Moments later, Liam and Emilia rush to her side to make sure she's alright. Kilika glares at them and bitterly asks if they've come to mock her now that she's been defeated. Liam gently assures her that isn't the case, saying he's genuinely worried about her, but Kilika refuses to believe him. She accuses him of running straight to Emilia the instant the spell wore off, helping her undo what was left of Kilika's magic. Emilia, however, calmly tells her that Liam was never under her spell to begin with. Kilika insists she's lying and tells them to just get it over with, banish her, execute her, anything, because she doesn't want to live like this anymore. But before she can say more, the king speaks up, declaring that if anyone deserves punishment, it's him, for being the reason Kilika ended up this way. Confused, Kilika demands to know what the hell he means. So the king explains that long ago he sealed away parts of her memory to protect her, though now he realizes that decision was a grave mistake. As he lists his forgetting skill, all of Kilika's lost memories come flooding back at once. She recalls that when she was a child, she spent her days training near the dungeon. One afternoon, a mysterious stranger appeared near the entrance and told her she could grow stronger much faster if she used one of the strange orbs he carried. Naively trusting the man, young Kilika took one of his orbs and ran into the dungeon to test it out. But the moment she did, a swarm of powerful monsters appeared out of nowhere. Realizing she couldn't take them all alone, she tried to flee, only to discover that the creatures were pursuing her outside. Dungeon monsters weren't supposed to be able to leave their dungeon, yet these were clearly different. Knowing they were heading straight for the elf village, Kilika chose to stand her ground and fight. She held out as best she could, and the chaos quickly drew the attention of nearby elves, who rushed to her aid after realizing something had gone terribly wrong. Liam was the first to arrive, but tragically he was immediately impaled through the torso by a goblin, leaving Kilika to watch helplessly as her friend died right in front of her. The trauma and guilt from that moment nearly shattered Kilika's mind, so the king decided to seal away those memories to protect her from the devastating truth. Also, Liam wasn't the only casualty from that battle, but the situation was ultimately salvaged thanks to Emilia, who used her spirit medium abilities to craft two advanced spells, gravity magic and resurrection magic. And with them, she was able to bring back everyone who had fallen, ensuring that no lives were truly lost that day. But because Kilika remained the only one unaware of what really happened, those who had been involved slowly and unintentionally began to drift away from her. So Kilika misinterpreted their distance, assumed they had lost interest in her simply because she wasn't a spirit medium like her sister. Overcome by the truth, Kilika collapses in tears, heartbroken that she ended up turning her own sister into an enemy over nothing more than a freaking painful misunderstanding. But Emilia gently tells her that's not true because no matter what happened, she could never bring herself to truly hate Kilika. Kilika knows she has a lot of making up to do for the pain she caused her sister, but Emilia reminds her that in the end, they are still family, and in her heart, nothing will ever change that shit. Later that night, a grand feast is held to celebrate Kilika's change of heart. The king personally thanks Akira for helping bring peace back to their family. As promised, he gives Emilia the freedom to decide her own future, even if that means she chooses to leave on a journey with Akira. On that note, the king asks Akira what his next destination will be, and Akira replies that he plans to head to the Beast Continent, Since Knight mentioned it's one of the best places to find high-quality equipment and weapons. At the same time, Asahina and the rest of Akira's classmates are seen boarding a ship bound for the Beast Continent as well. They had originally intended to stay put and wait for Akira to catch up with them, but by now they've grown so strong that the monsters in the Yamato dungeon no longer offer any experience. So rather than waste time standing still, they decided to travel to the Beast Continent and upgrade their gear in preparation for whatever comes next. The following day, the Elf King arranges a full escort to accompany Akira and Emilia to the outer borders of the kingdom so they can safely continue their travels. Akira feels like it's a bit excessive, but the king explains that there's been a string of kidnappings happening along the coastline lately, and he simply wants to make sure they're well protected. In fact, he even says he'd feel far more at ease if Akira allowed them to personally accompany him, but Akira politely declines and settles for just taking the carriage. As they ride along, Akira turns to Knight and asks why she kept such a low profile during all the chaos with the elves, especially since she clearly could have stepped in. Knight calmly explains that she didn't want to risk exposing her true identity as a demon since not everyone would be as accepting as he is. Akira gets it and he understands why she preferred to keep up the act of being an ordinary cat, but he still wonders if the Demon Lord is okay with that, especially if he's still watching. Knight confirms he's right to be cautious. Her senses remain connected to the Demon Lord so he can still monitor her actions, but she assures him that he no longer holds sway over her decisions and she has absolutely no plans to betray Akira now or ever. That eases Akira's mind a little, especially considering he might have to face the Demon Lord one day, depending on how things unfold, but Emilia doesn't see it going that way. If anything, she feels like the Demon Lord might actually want to be on friendly terms with him, and surprisingly Knight agrees. After what Akira did yesterday, there's no doubt in her mind that he's caught the Demon Lord's attention. Very few people can manipulate shadow magic effectively in combat, yet Akira managed to shroud himself in it completely. Akira explains it just sort of happened in the moment. He was terrified the magic would spiral out of control and hurt Kilika, but even if it wasn't intentional, pulling off something like that is no small feat. Right then, Akira picks up on something suspicious up ahead and tells the driver to stop the carriage. He steps out and informs the others that his detection skill alerted him to a group of people further down the road. The driver grabs a telescope and sure enough, spots a group of bandits waiting just ahead. And worse, the bandits also spot them and reveal they're holding an elf hostage. They threaten to kill her unless Akira and the others comply with their demands. So with no better option for now, the group holds back while the bandits toss them a pile of ropes and order everyone to tie each other. At that moment, Emilia steps down from the carriage, and the moment the bandits catch sight of her hair color, they light up with excitement. They immediately recognize her as one of the elf princesses, and if they turn her over to someone like Lord Graham, they're certain to land a massive reward. While the bandits are too busy grinning and whispering about their lucky break, Akira silently activates his presence concealment. In the blink of an eye, he knocks them all unconscious before any of them even realizes what's happening. Afterward, he tells the driver to go ahead and tie them up using the rope they had brought, and as that's handled, Akira starts wondering who this Lord Graham character even is. Luckily, the driver says he's actually heard the name before and explains that Graham is a noble from the kingdom of Uruk. That's enough of a lead for Akira, so he instructs the driver to take the captured bandits back to the elf castle while he and Emilia will carry on the rest of the way by foot. The driver starts to protest, reminding Akira that his instructions were to escort both of them all the way to the port, but since they're already fairly close, Akira reassures him it won't be an issue. A short time later, Akira, Emilia, and Knight board a ship, and once they reach their destination, Akira plans to gear up with some new equipment to keep pushing his strength even further. Emilia finds it a bit surprising that he's still focused on leveling up, especially when he already seems so powerful, but Akira insists that if he's serious about getting revenge for Saren, then he can afford to stop now. Knight chimes in and says the port city they're headed for actually has a labyrinth, so if Akira wants to train more, he'll have the perfect opportunity. Still, that's a few days away, so she suggests they relax and enjoy the trip in the meantime. Emilia is practically glowing with excitement because it's her first time sailing, and she tells Akira she's really looking forward to watching the sunset with him. But when she turns to see what he thinks, she realizes he hasn't heard a single word. His attention is completely absorbed in a book, the same one her father gave him as a farewell gift, and he's reading so intently that he doesn't even notice Emilia's annoyed expression. In fact, Akira spends the entire voyage buried in that book, leaving Emilia feeling a bit left out by the time they finally arrive at the Beast Folk continent. As they disembark, Akira notices something off. The only ones doing the heavy lifting around the port are humans. That immediately strikes him as strange, but before he can dwell on it for too long, a group of beastmen steps forward and blocks their path, demanding that he leave Emilia behind and get lost. It doesn't take long for Akira to realize what's going on, and the beast folk here clearly have a low opinion of humans, and this could easily spiral into something messy. So without wasting time, he calmly asks Emilia to stay back and let him handle it. Akira starts walking straight toward the beastmen, and they immediately burst into laughter, mocking him outright. After all, there's no way a scrawny human could possibly pose a threat to their kind. But instead of using brute force, even though he could easily wipe the floor with them, Akira takes the smarter route and casts a shadow spell that temporarily blinds them. With that handled, he calmly leads Emilia past the stunned group. As they make their way into town, Akira picks up on the fact that a lot of people are staring, and it doesn't seem aimed at them. But at night, so she explains it's because cats are feared and looked down on in this region. That evening, after checking into a hotel and enjoying a filling dinner, Akira suggests they call it a night. The room has 2 beds, but with a flustered look, Emilia notes that the beds are so large the 2 of them could easily share one. The comment catches Akira completely off guard, and while he's still processing it, Night, fully aware of what Emilia is trying to pull, decides to make herself scarce to give them some privacy. Akira tries calling her back, but she's already disappeared. Then Emilia casually announces that she's going to shower, leaving him frozen, unsure how to react. Then when Emilia comes back dressed in a nightgown, she finds Akira already in bed, employing the highly advanced technique of pretending to be asleep. Figuring he must be tired from the day's events, she lets it slide, puts her plans on hold, and slips into bed beside him to get some rest. The following day, Night returns to the room and upon seeing Akira and Emilia lying in the same bed, jumps to conclusions and assumes they must have gotten a little cozy after all, but she brushes it aside and reminds them they've got company arriving soon, so they should probably get dressed. Not long after, there's a knock at the door. Akira tells the guest to come in, and a man named Crow steps inside. Night introduces him as the top blacksmith on the entire continent, adding that she met with him last night to ask for a favor. Normally, Crow wouldn't take on random requests like this, but when the infamous nightmare of Adley asks in person, even he couldn't turn her down. That title catches Emilia off guard, and she wonders what Crow meant by calling Night that, but there's no time to ask as Crow immediately requests Akira's weapon so he can take a look. After examining it briefly, he notes that the weapon's clearly been overused, likely in a labyrinth, and has taken quite a beating, and Emilia is stunned that he could figure all that out just from a quick glance. Akira asks if Crow will be able to repair the weapon, and Crow replies that with the right materials and a proper budget, it should definitely be doable. Akira also inquires about the possibility of crafting around 20 throwable assassin knives, but Crow looks taken aback upon realizing Akira is actually an assassin. After regaining his composure, he tells Akira that he likely lacks the experience to properly handle weapons made by someone like him. Emilia immediately takes offense to what sounds like an insult toward Akira's skill, but Akira can't exactly argue with the assessment. Night steps in and tells Emilia to let it go because while Crow may be a blacksmith now, he used to be part of the hero's party, and when it comes to battle experience, he definitely knows his stuff. Even though Crow stands by what he said about Akira's lack of experience, he still agrees to take on the job of forging the weapons Akira requested. He scribbles down a detailed list of the materials Akira will need to gather for the job, and in the meantime, he says he'll be holding onto Akira's sword to keep it from getting damaged any further. Crow, claiming the sword, comes as a bit of a surprise, but Night assures Akira that his weapon is in good hands, and there's no one better than Crow when it comes to this craft. Akira trusts Night's judgment, but that doesn't change the fact that he has no idea where to even start looking for all the materials listed. Night explains that the fastest way to find them is by exploring the city's labyrinth, and as a bonus, it would give Akira a great opportunity to level up, which makes the plan sound perfect to him. The labyrinth is located near the center of the city, but getting access depends on a person's adventurer rank. Akira doesn't think that's going to be much of a roadblock, so he starts putting together a game plan for the hunt. While he's doing that, Emilia asks if it's okay for her to step out for a bit since there's something she wants to discuss with Crow directly. Akira says it's fine by him because he still has a lot of research to do about the labyrinth before diving in anyway, but he does ask Night to go with her and keep him updated via telepathy if anything seems off. A short while later, Emilia and Night make their way to Crow's workshop. Once there, Emilia brings up something she heard, that during the failed mission to defeat the Demon Lord, only the hero and one beastman made it out alive. That beastman she assumes must have been Crow. Crow tells her she's welcome to mock him if that's what she came for, but that wasn't Emilia's intent at all. She believes Crow survived because he was strong, and that's why she wants to ask him to teach her how to fight. Crow turns her down immediately, saying he made a decision long ago to never take on another apprentice. He explains that every person he tried to train either quit or fell into a deep depression, so he doesn't see the point in wasting his time. But Emilia firmly promises that she won't give up or break down. She wants to walk beside Akira with her head held high, and if he's going to keep getting stronger, then she wants to grow too, so the gap between them doesn't keep widening. Crow once again calls Night the nightmare of Adley and reminds her that their agreement was strictly about fixing Akira's weapon. But Night calmly points out that Emilia is making this request on her own, so it has nothing to do with Akira. She also politely asked him to stop using that old title, saying that her name is Night now. Curious, Emilia asks why he keeps calling her that in the first place. Night explains that years ago, the Demon Lord sent her to Adley as punishment after the humans invaded demon territory. Her official task was to issue a warning to the city's leaders, but she let her fury take control and went far beyond what was necessary, reducing the entire city to rubble. She admits she had no justification for what she did and takes full responsibility for her actions. That's the very reason she asked Akira to end her life when they first met, but she's changed since then, and as long as she serves under Akira, something like that will never happen again. Crow asks her if she really believes it's that easy to leave her past behind, but Knight says she knows full well that what she did can't be forgiven, so if he still hates her, she understands. To her surprise though, Crow says he's never held any hatred toward her. A few years back, after he and the hero party failed to defeat the Demon Lord, Crow was holding a memorial at his sister's grave when Knight happened to appear. She immediately recognized him as one of the few survivors from that battle, and when she saw he was grieving, she told him he could kill her if he wanted and she wouldn't resist. But Crow told her that he didn't blame her for what had happened, and as far as he was concerned, she was nothing more than a weapon forged by the Demon Lord to carry out his commands, and blaming her would be no different than blaming the blade rather than the one who wielded it. In response, Knight asks if he ever planned to confront the Demon Lord again, but Crow calmly tells her that neither she nor the Demon Lord was responsible for his sister's death. After Knight's attack on the city, Crow's sister had been doing her best to help people who were trapped beneath the rubble, but at that same moment, a nobleman was frantically trying to escape. Instead of finding another path, he chose to blast through the area, hitting Crow's sister with a deadly attack just because she was in his way. That man was the one who truly took her from him, so if Crow ever intended to take revenge, it would have been on Lord Graham. But in the end, he never followed through with it, because he knew deep down that his kind-hearted sister would never want him to walk that road. At that point, Amelia cuts in and outright calls Crow a coward for backing out. She accuses him of clinging to a fake belief that his sister wouldn't want revenge, just so he wouldn't have to face the truth or deal with his pain. She says she gets it more than anyone, because for a long time she told herself the same thing, that she was doing everything for her sister's sake, but Akira helped her realize how far off base she really was. Her words hit Crow hard, so they stir something deep inside him, and he needs a moment to deal with it. So he quietly asks Amelia and Knight to leave him alone for the rest of the day. At the same time, Akira is out in the city researching the labyrinth, when out of nowhere monsters begin pouring out of it and flooding the streets. Amelia sees the chaos unfolding and rushes in to help, but suddenly, she's intercepted by a boy named Orum. She instantly recognizes him as the same boy who deceived Kilika when they were younger. Orum says he's acting under the Demon Lord's orders to keep Amelia alive, since she has rare magic that might come in handy, so he surrounds her with monsters and swiftly takes her hostage. And by the time Akira arrives on the scene, Orum has already dragged Amelia back into the dungeon. Akira plans to go in and get her, but first he has to clean up the situation outside. He tells Knight to step back, and she quickly takes to the skies, knowing exactly what's coming. Akira then unleashes his shadow magic without holding back, letting it consume every monster in sight. But the massive strain on his body takes its toll, and as soon as the last enemy falls, he collapses from exhaustion. This was the end of episode 5. Subscribe to not miss the next episode.